His plant-based nuggets. He's pretty good. Me, I like to eat mine with hot sauce. Put hot sauce on it. Tastes like you actually eating chicken. But then you can use any kind of dipping sauce. So what we had was, there was a comment on, the video that I made about being alienated or being outcasted or isolated. So I did make that video, and someone responded that most people who have websites and those that host interviews are the worst type of perpetrators. I do not believe this platform to be like that, which is, it's a good, it's good that he feel like that, because, I try to be as genuine and as authentic as I possibly can, especially when speaking about certain things that may be sensitive. It may be sensitive what people experience. Some people may experience, as far as being watched, monitored, and mobbed, and harassed. So you don't want to come off, superficial or even delusional. You want to be as, as sound and as accurate as you possibly can as far as relaying certain things. So that was cool. So I told him, righteous, I would like to address that as well, as to why it's like that and what's the purpose behind it. So that was, my reply to that comment. You wanted to address that, because what you do see is, this is not something that is mildly discussed, but it's widely discussed. People discuss this, and they tend to elaborate on gang stalking, how to protect yourself from it, certain tactics of it, the hidden truth of gang stalking, what is a targeted individual, gang stalking. Then you do have people that accumulate huge amounts of views, because this is the topic that a lot of people seem interested in. And some people become inclusive in certain things and want to share in it. Me, on the other hand, I really don't care about sharing in anything. When you're your authentic self, you tend to try to set the standard for certain things, or you're what you would call one that set trends and don't follow trends. Even when you see certain symbolism, that a person might wear, like a star, and you don't wear the star for a particular religious association or a religious purpose. You wear it to show that you are aware, of who people are and what they actually are behind, and these are certain things that the onlooker may not understand, but it's understood to those that understand them, to those that need to understand it. So, that's one of the reasons behind, you making that understanding understood to certain people, because it's been brought to your attention, it's been brought to your attention as to what's actually going on and who's behind what and how things are brought about, as far as like the gang stalking community, there's no community because you know, there's no communication amongst them, as far as you being someone who comes off authentic, you would relate to other people that may come off authentic. You might see or hear certain things that parallel to things that you experience. So you relate to it and you kind of adapt to it. Like you're adaptive to what they are conveying, and you may have some form of skepticism as far as receiving them as genuine, um, not going to say targeted individuals, but genuine people with that knowledge, of what is actually going on. First, the moment you have a certain status that exceeds the norm, as far as you being on a platform and you putting yourself out there and you making yourself aware, known, then I think that it's time to deviate from even discussing the topic of gang stalking, because you're going to be watched by the people in particular, just people that may be aware of who you are, or if they are aware that you make content, they may flock to your page and flock to your channel, and they may even see you in person and take an interest in watching you and monitoring your actions. So that is something that you would have to rule out when you become one that let's see, gets,
so hey guys, it's Camera.
that gets a certain amount of subscribers. I'm not sure, she says she's a therapist, so I'm not sure if she would be categorized as a targeted individual, as more so someone that talks about gang stalking and what trauma and family and stuff like that. So that's something that you would have to rule out for the most part. Those that experience gang stalking firsthand, and those that deal with the psychological aspect of gang stalking. So what gang stalking actually is a psychological operation. And when you're dealing with psychology and social psychology, you're dealing with surveying, and surveying would be a form of surveillance. When you're gathering information and ideas and opinions and behaviors of a people, this comes in a form of surveying them, and we'll talk about that. But that's something that I wanted to discuss, because I would have to cover this up because dog is up here and dog is nosy and he can't eat plant-based stuff, because I'm sure it got salt and stuff in there that's not good for him to eat. So he becomes nosy at times. So that's just you shedding light on certain things, when it comes to the Freemasons' involvement in the gang stalking program. that they are operative in so many aspects of our reality, even the construction or the um, designing and building of the United States was founded on Freemason principles. When you go back to George Washington and his association with the Freemasons, and this is something that is um, passed on from this from this generation to that generation, from that generation to that generation. So it's a generational thing when it comes to Freemasons. So you do know that Freemasons is a part of the bloodstream in America. And one particular page of gang stalking, they was talking about they don't discuss certain things. I think I can find it. This particular one right here, gang stalking reality. If you go and look at their page, um, they're telling you that anybody that talks about religion, spiritualism is fake and lying to you. So that is his take of anybody talking about gang stalking, and that statement itself is false because it's spiritualism. Now, religion, like I said, religion is a spirit. So if they're pushing the religious spirit on you, then that is that might be a form of fake. If they're telling you that the only way out is in a particular religion, and the gang stalking goes away, because I've had people tell me at one point in time that the elect of God, God's elect, like people that are divinely or associated with the divine, or God, or whatever people might want to call it. They have to get baptized in order for certain things to go away, which only indicates that the people that are doing it are the people that are behind baptism. So that involves the religious spirit. You have to side with a particular religion in order for a gang stalking to cease and desist. And the spiritual aspect of it is what it actually is. It's spiritual warfare. Spiritual warfare, because what you don't understand is that depression is a spirit, paranoia is a spirit, happiness is a spirit, peace is a spirit. The spirit of peace. The truth is a spirit, the spirit of truth. The lying is a spirit, the spirit of falsehood, the spirit of deception. So it's all spiritual when you look at it from a spiritual aspect. Now, he also stated that I do not talk about God, Jesus, Allah, demons, Satan, spiritualism, tarot, horoscope, chosen ones, or any other supernatural entity. I talk about logic and what can be measured and observed, meaning reality. I have my faith, but I do not use my platform for that content. You change the world by what you can prove. Everyone has their own faith and creed, but what you can prove is what spurs change. Now, what I can prove is that these are, even though it's your word, even though it's word of mouth, is that in a dream or in a vision that you experienced, you was tapped on the shoulder, and it was relayed to you that Freemasons had your inheritance. And this was before you being aware that you are in a particular program being watched and monitored. you was tapped on the shoulder. It was divinely revealed to you that Freemasons have your inheritance. What inheritance? And you are made aware that Freemasons are in possession of everything that is to be owned by anything. Whether it's Jewish masonry or Jews or what you want to call the Jews, but you do trace them back to any and everything that can be owned. I've given you so many paper trails that led back to Freemasons, and like I said, you can't exclude Eastern Stars, but they do know that certain things belong to certain people. Even with Billy Carson, I've seen him state that a lot of people they left stuff here and they do return, and when they return they know exactly where their things are. So this isn't something that is not discussed or not understood by people. This is something that is recorded in the history of humanity. Whether you're dealing with Hinduism, whether you're dealing with Christianity, whatever you're dealing with a form of returning, like a person or people being able to come back and have possession of certain things that was left behind by them. So you don't take that lightly, especially when you're dealing with Christianity. Christ returns. When you're dealing with Hinduism and Indian culture and Chinese culture and Japanese culture, all these cultures, they're talking about the returning of a people. Whether it's you physically returning or the minds, the mental persona of a person, and that dates all the way back to even before ancient Egypt, in ancient Egypt as well, with the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak, the spirit and the soul, and the persona of a person returns back, and they assume their identity every reemergence into the world. So we do know that reincarnation is a human identified phenomenon that everybody seems to understand it in some form, whether it's just saying one person can or all people can. And what I have is proof of going somewhere, being led somewhere, and when you're led there, it's occupied by Freemasons, and Freemasons were, this isn't something that you're just making up in on the fly. This is something that has been stated over and over and over again, that I went to a particular place and it was Freemasons there, and the Freemasons, who I didn't know, knew who I was, and they asked somebody that knew me, that was placed in my life as maybe one to watch you and monitor you to make sure you don't understand who you actually are. They asked him, "Isn't that Yoshi?" And when the guy was seeing that I was watching over where they was pointing from, he jumped back, which only indicates that that's something that you can prove, that Freemasons are involved in this particular thing. And why are they involved in it? There may be different reasons why people are gang stalked or whatever, but we know that there was a theft that transpired at some point in time, and there's people that are still in possession of those thefts, We do know that in the bottom of the Vatican there's ancient Egyptian bodies in the bottom of the Vatican. We do know that. We do know that there's Carter that dug up stuff that didn't belong to him and stole things and became rich off of those things that he stole and didn't return. So we do know that there's thefts that took place and by a particular people, and why certain things are the way that they are. It's why you have certain symbolism, dating back and reflecting certain other people's cultures, but it's all intertwined in that. So there's no separating Egypt from Freemasonry, and we do know that they have some correlation with each other in some form or fashion, whether it's knowledge that they assumed and or illegally, or whether it was legally or illegally. They assumed that particular knowledge, and to this day they are operating off of that knowledge, and maybe don't want certain people to be aware of that. And some of us are aware of that, that this is Egyptian knowledge that they are using, where you have a cult of people that use the Ankh and the Eye, and they assume the role of these people, and you can't shy away from the fact that there's actually a cult of people that to this day operate behind that and are on certain platforms, and maybe their whole objective is, that is to assume the role of that, but they don't have the the authentic ties to it. They may think that it's based on skin as opposed to being based on spirit. And being based on spirit, you would know that, it would be spiritually immoral for a people to assume the role of certain things, but not seek justice for certain things that happened to the people that predated them, but just to join or to be inclusive in certain things, but that's just you getting into why Freemasons may be the ones that have been targeting certain people, for whatever reason they are targeting people for. But we live in a reality where everybody wants to be included. This is inclusion, is part of the reasons why a lot of people do certain things or would say certain things. But I stated in one of my videos that if it doesn't fit right with my spirit, I wouldn't do it at all. I wouldn't want to be a part of it. And that is having what you call self-control. But, like I said, this is all something that you deal with proof. You're dealing with, you're proving certain things. And the things that you can prove is what this particular individual says is what changes, the world, or what can be used to change certain things. So what I do understand is that gang stalking itself is biblical. So if you really wanted to talk about gang stalking, you would go to the Bible. You would use the Bible, because behind that, but the people behind the Bible may be the ones responsible for gang stalking. So you shed light on those that need the light shined on them, and that is just what it is. If you understand targeting, you would understand the story of Jesus Christ, you would understand that story, whether you believe in Christ or you don't. You would understand that that was gang stalking to the third degree, where they was sending people as spies, and they sent out APB. If anybody see him, y'all report back to us so we can arrest him. And that is part of society. Society as people are more responsive to crowd participation as opposed to individuals' interests. They're when you're talking about social and psychological experiments, they go off of the pressures of the people, off of social pressure, and what the people seem to be interested in. So we also had the inmates in Louisiana, which, if people didn't understand, that was a social psychological operation where they sought to get the participation of the people to bring in fugitives. This was something that they orchestrated. There's something that was orchestrated, and it wasn't just a random thing. If we can get their own kind to be assistive in some form of targeting and surveilling and capturing inmates, then we still have that desired control of the people. And what I've seen by this particular experiment is that they place bets. They place bets, which would be in a form of casting lots. They place bets on which individuals would get caught first, and then you also had the bounty hunters that sought to bring in these particular escaped inmates. But this was a psychological operation, a social psychological operation, and an experiment to see how the people would be used to surveil others. Where you have this particular person, I believe, still at large, and what's given that away, that it's masonically orchestrated, is that him being the outstanding escapee is that he's 33 years of age, which symbolically 33 is the sacred number in Freemasonry, or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's 33. You had Nipsey Hussle supposedly something like 33, I believe. I'm not sure, but they was trying to associate Nipsey Hussle with Jesus Christ at one point in time. There was rappers that said, "Oh, Nipsey Hussle is Jesus Christ," and all lies and all falsehood, but it's all Masonic deception. It's all deception, and yeah, this guy is still at large, I believe, to this day. And there was websites where they needed your participation of who's going to get caught first, which one is going to get caught, and you've seen it on social media. You've seen it on social media. So their whole objective was to get you to surveillance, to let your lens do the surveying, which when you're dealing with social psychology, you know, surveys are research tools used by social psychologists to gather information about people's opinions, attitudes, and behaviors in social contexts. They are commonly used to study a wide range of topics, including attitudes, belief, interpersonal relationships, and social influence. So there you have, why you are needed, because you are used to gather and gain information from, you know, you're used to gather and gain information. And that is the purpose of social experiments, because they gain insight from your input, and you are actually needed as far as you being instrumental in carrying out certain operations or even experiments. But these are just some of the things that you do acknowledge from that, and when going back to gang stalking, that particular thing, when you have such an influx of the topic of gang stalking, the purpose of that is always to attenuate, to lessen the degree of it, to sensitize you to it. When there's a lot of something, it becomes unrare. If there wasn't a rarity of a certain thing like diamond and gold, then the value of it would decrease. If it was abundance of diamonds everywhere you can go, you can find diamonds anywhere, you can find gold anywhere, then it wouldn't be as valuable as it actually is. So when they do create operatives, or perpetrators that, or perps, what they call perps, to discuss the topic and even discuss it in more detail than the people that actually experience it, that weakens the people that actually experience it testimony. So therefore you have an influx of so many gang stalking, targeted individuals, gang stalking, my testimony, and we do know that it is, a spiritual thing. So when you're making content and you want to get it to the right people, and there's a million others that you can check out, and yours is in competition with this particular page and that particular page, that would break your spirit. That would affect your motivation to speak on it, or even make you comment when you know that what you are experiencing isn't common. So the reason why there's so much of it is to make the uncommon seem common, and that in turn weakens the effect of even the topic of gang stalking. So that's why there's so much. This is, like I said, it's still all organized and under the operation of a certain people. And like I said, it's because people want inclusion. They don't want change. A lot of people don't want change. They want inclusion. And then there's people who don't care about inclusion, that cares about change. that really want change. And one of the things that I've seen that is effective in bringing forth change is understanding what is actually behind what. So if people in the church don't know that the church is behind certain things, maybe the the awareness of it can bring forth change in the church, because what you do have proof of is that you were out in Philadelphia. You do have proof. It's something that you can prove. You was out in Philadelphia. You did see that there was a pandemic, there was an epidemic out there, as a drug crisis out there. You have seen that. You've bear witness that. You've been amongst that. You took it upon yourself to go out there. You have proof of that venture out there. You had nothing but jewelry around your neck. As you can see, at one point in time in your videos, you had a car, you had jewelry. And that jewelry you took off your neck. You pawned that jewelry. That was real jewelry. That was real gold. You pawned it for pennies on the dollar to travel to this state that was an hour and some change away from your state, because you had, the time on your hand, you had the resources to do it, and you had the spirit to do it. So you did go out there, and you do have proof that those particular people were paid to be out there. They told you out their own mouth. You seen them. You seen that it was just they was teaming out there with just drug addicts accumulated in one area. You did see that the police or the law enforcement was actively involved in that. You did see that there was Freemasons actively involved in that, and you did see that the church was actively involved in that. Every last thing that you had named in there was actively involved in there. So you do know that those people was also gang stalked when you had people going around recording videos of the drug addicts, and they was profiting from those videos. I even seen a video with me in it cleaning up out there, being that you was gang stalked and you was watched as well while you was out there. So we do know that this is proof. This is what you can prove. This isn't speculation. This is something that you actually witnessed firsthand. In the church, when they see me, that they was out there preaching, and they knew that they was doing something wrong because the spirit gave it away. So when they see me out there, they knew that I wasn't from out there, and that I was well aware of what was going on out there. They was giving away free drugs and giving away free food, and then preaching to them, and preaching to them about Jesus Christ, and that is not something that you can make up, to try to give a religion a bad name. This is something that you can bring to the people so they can actually start to clean up that religion and give it a good name, So do you bear witness to certain things and turn a blind eye to it, or do you come with the spirit of truth and shed light on it and allow others to decide whether they want to be a part of this, or do they want to be a part of the correction of it? Again, correction is righteousness. The act of correcting what is wrong is what it entails, righteousness. So if this is a thing that's established on righteousness, then they would have to correct everything that's wrong with it, that's wrong with it. We don't seek to tear down religions. We don't seek to tear down strongholds. We seek to help them understand their influence on certain things. You know, when it's with Freemasons, we don't want to tear away something that's been established and rooted in the bloodstream of humanity for XYZ amount of years. We don't seek to tear down churches and stuff that, you know, is rooted in the bloodstream of this region and that region and that region. We don't wish to do that. We seek to, you know, bring forth correction, you know, to correct these people, so these people can correct everything that they allow to go wrong or that they allow to be wrong, you know. So that's just to be understood. We know that there's no way in the world that the people will you know, destroy these institutions that they have established and that they have so much riding on. We know that. That is delusional. For you to think that because we're demonizing Freemasons and Eastern Stars and the Christian church and the Catholic church and all these other things, that, you know, they're just going to stop existing. That would be delusional. But what can happen is that because they have a working knowledge that's beneficial to growth and development and change and construction, maybe they may lean towards doing that as opposed to doing the opposite. You know, being that there's people down here with eyes that see everything that's being done behind the scene, which would be those that are spiritually enlightened. So for people to be under the impression that anybody talking about religion or spiritualism is fake, and are lying, then that person is very, very delusional himself or herself, you know. So one thing that particular person had stated was in one video, you know, in one video he was discussing that every time he ride past a particular place, the same people's there around the same time, around the same, and I've stated that in certain videos that I created, you know, that every time I go in the store, there's people in that store at the same time. But as far as to why he's in there, or why they're stalking him, gang stalking him, what would be the purpose? Who are you? You know, that would make them want to gang stalk you. You know, who are you? You know, me, I've made it clear of who I am. You know, I made it clear as to who I was. You know, this is who I, you know, proclaim to be. This is who I claim to be. You know, son of the true and living God. You know what I mean? Not the son of the God of this world, not the son of that God, but the true and living God, which may be, you know, adverse to what other people believe in. Their God may not be the true and living God. It may be the God of death and destruction and money and mayhem and backstabbing and child sacrifices and stuff like that. That may be their God, but that's not my God. Is the true and living God, the God of life, the God of life. And the name isn't even important of what that God is. So we don't share in that same thing, which would get you gang stalked. And because you are connected to that God gives you insight and has always given you insight. You don't even have to relate to a passage in any Bible or any book. You don't have to do any of that in order for you to gain insight and wisdom from that particular God. You know, and this is the God that I knew before I knew any other God. So that may be part of the reasons why certain people may be gang stalked, because everything else has a origin. You know, when you're talking about Hebrew came from somewhere. When you're talking about Christianity came from somewhere, you know. But this one has no beginning nor no ending. You know, this one has no beginning nor no ending. It's living, and it's the truth, and it's a living thing. It's a living God. You know, and you know there's stories. You know, that that relate to that. That who are you, and who are you to talk about this? Who are you to say that you was there from the beginning and went to get stones and stone a person? So we are dealing with those same particular people that hate the truth. Hate the truth and want their ways to be just when they are wicked. You know, but that's the reason why I am watched. And when I go to stores, I go to the stores, and I play the lottery, because you see the ins and outs of the numbers. Like I told you, it's not gambling for me. It's not, oh, I hope I win. It's you seeing numbers and seeing them before they actually come out and know where the numbers stem from. The numbers, if you want to know, is gas prices. The numbers are gas prices. If you're in New Jersey, if you know the gas prices, then you would see the correlation between the lottery numbers and the gas prices. You would see the correlation with the lottery and cigarette prices, how they always fluctuate. And then you would know that there's flip numbers and reverse numbers. And these numbers are the same thing as the lottery numbers. So if the number is, if the gas price is $3.19, that can also be $8.64. That can also be $8.19. That can also be $9.63. That can be all these numbers. So you're likely to see those particular numbers, play out. So when you're in the store, you're being observant. Not only you, but also the cameras. They're watching you as you play the numbers, as you play the lottery. It's a certain technology in the cameras that record facial and biometrics, and they know you and they can pinpoint you. But like I said, they own the technology. They own everything. Basically everything that can be owned by anybody, even though everything is given to you by a living God. It's the God of life, and it belongs to the living. And there's no way for anybody living to own anything that is given to you by something that was meant, something that was given to you that was meant for everything living. So that's one of the reasons why they're in the store when I'm in the store, to make sure that you do not manifest any kind of victories in your lottery. So I do see, and only time you're winning is when you go to a store randomly, like you normally don't go to that store. Your numbers come out. The numbers that you go to play, they actually come out. So you are aware of that. And that's just the reason why they're in the stores. People that that go to the stores that you go to are always in the stores when you are in the stores. Like, they have access to these people's minds, maybe because they may be hacked. They may be hacked. Like I said, it could be something in the food, it could be something in the water, it could be something on an app that they have. It could be something, it could be anything. But what they do have is the access to engage people and send people and station people, and that is something that you experience. and spiritually you're aware of that, not just logically or rationally, but spiritually you're aware of that. It's something in your spirit that triggers your awareness of that, and it's something that I was made aware of spiritually when it came to, you know, the program, something that you was made aware of. But I did want to elaborate on why they had so many, channels of gang stalking and targeting, and that's the reason why, to weaken true testimony, to overshadow true testimony, and to create so much of it that it becomes common. Like anybody and everybody experiences this, and it's no big deal. For some it's just paranoia, and sometimes that's the end result of it. Is paranoia. Why do you feel that way? Ooh, people watching you. Yo, y'all watching. Ooh, people watching you. Ooh, they're targeting you. Ooh, they're doing this to you. Ooh, sometimes it's that. It's paranoia. But for others, it's a spiritual thing that's deep rooted in a betrayal. That's rooted in the betrayal. And they, like I stated before, sometimes they disseminate things that you experience or things about your character to others, where you see versions of you, you see versions of you being used by these other people. You see versions of you being used by them, where you have people that say that they're ancient beings and they've been here, 3, 4 times, but they believe them. But when it comes to you, nobody wants to believe that. Nobody wants to believe that, son, I've been here since the beginning of time. Nobody wants to believe that about you, But then when, it was stated biblically by somebody that wasn't associated with them, they ran and got stones. And when he came back, that particular person slipped away. But what we do have is, people that are what you want to call swappers of destinies, swappers of destinies. And like I stated, this isn't a new thing. This is something that predates the history of mankind, especially certain religions. When you're dealing with the tablet of destinies, they swapped hands. They stole something from one person. It was given to one person. Then that person was taken out and it was stolen from them and gave to somebody else. Then it was given to somebody else and it was given to somebody else, but it didn't rightfully belong to them. It was called the tablet of destinies, where there's kingship and rulership that's divinely given to people, and is passed down through the divine to mankind. And I strongly believe that people have that knowledge but don't have that spirit, so that's the reason behind a lot of things that people proclaim to be. They don't have the spirit of it. They have the knowledge of it, the wisdom of it, but they don't have the spirit of it. And like I said, it's mostly the people. The people are the ones that have to engage. If they do not engage, then the people behind the people don't have any power over the situation. So if the people can't engage or don't want to engage, then the manipulators of the people won't have that stronghold over them. But like I stated, I wanted to share that because it was stated that my page, my channel doesn't appear to be that. And again, you're not even in competition with these people, but other people are in competition with you because you are the truth. They see you as the truth. And they may be agents of manipulation, deception, paranoia, one that comes to stir up feelings of paranoia, or even just to overshadow. They agents of overshadowing. I even shown you videos where some of the things that you posted was taken down and replaced with other people saying the same exact thing that you said. And this is proof. Everything is based on being genuine. When it comes to certain people, this isn't an act. This isn't an act like this Unk 607. This is an act. Let me tell you something. This isn't an act. We've seen other, instances with you where you wasn't doing that in your first couple of interviews, but after people started taking a interest or a liking into the way that you say certain things, now you become an act. And as you become an act, you become a sideshow. But these are actors and entertainers that they tend to employ, to overshadow and to outwit, those with superior wit, and they don't do anything but allow those people to know how spiritually sound and more powerful they are than those other people, because this is an act for us, and I'm not sure how many of us it is, but like I said, when you're the son of the true and living God, then, or daughter of the true and living God, then you don't deal in falsehood, in death and deception. You don't deal in that. You deal with the truth. You deal with life, which becomes the way of living. So that's one of the reasons why, I have to, make myself or my understanding of certain things known, because it's required of you to do so, because there is so much deception and falsehood in the world. And if Satan can masquerade as a being of light, then Satan can also masquerade as a targeted individual, one that's a victim of gang stalking, one with a testimony of being watched and monitored and followed. If Satan can masquerade as a being of light, then there's nothing Satan cannot masquerade as. And then when you're talking about Satan, again, we're talking about the evil men and women, wicked people, masquerading as righteous people, And if they was righteous, they wouldn't have to masquerade as, you know, that, you know. But even, you know, it's stated for, you know, sheep to masquerade as wolves so that they don't become prey to the wolves, you know, but be amongst them, but not of them. So it's a two-way thing, you know. So for light beings or people of the light, they have to have a dark side, and for people with a dark side, they can assume a light side. But which side is the right side? You know, that's what we really want to. That's what we really want to know. What is who is who and what's actually what? Because there lies confusion. You know, but that's just something I felt like sharing because, you know, like I said, it was brought to my attention that some people say that a lot of these people aren't aren't genuine in their delivery. You know what I mean? They aren't genuine. You know, so I wanted to address that. You know, and the reason why perpetrators pose as targeted individuals is because, you know, they want to overshadow the people that actually experience it for spiritual reasons, could be for profit, could be for other reasons, but their whole objective is to overshadow those that actually experience um, mobbing. And remember, when you read about Christ, Christ didn't write anything. It was the people around him that wrote everything, you know, and it was he was being so watched that they knew what Christ was doing even when he wasn't amongst his disciples. When he left from amongst his disciples and he fasted for 40 days, and all that was still being recorded. So we're dealing with, you know, surveillance, you know, surveillance, you know, surveillance, you know. And like I stated, you know, a lot of things are psychological, social psychological experiments and operations that the people collectively participate in. You know, they participate in. So when you go to, you know, the story, I believe it's John 11, verse 57. I'll probably bring it to you. Let me see. Let's see if we could. Uh, 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 uh. That's it. As you see it. John 11:57 states that the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. You know, and that's going back to the Louisiana inmates. They was given orders that if anyone knew where they was at, you know, they was to report them. You know, this is when they have a bounty on a person. You know, when they have a bounty on a person, when people give orders, you know, in other Bible, in other books, it states command. It states command. You know, it was a commandment it was given a commandment that if anyone, you know, found out where Jesus was, should report it so they might arrest him. So, you know, like I told you, you can't deviate from the Bible, you know, especially religiously when talking about gang stalking, because this is gang stalking in its rawest form, you know, in its rawest form, you know, and if people don't understand that, then maybe they should. So when we look for people to end gang stalking, we should always turn to the church. You know, we should turn to the church, not join the church, not assimilate, but to turn to the church as, you know, being responsive as far as understanding what gang stalking is, and to, you know, deter those actions that may be orchestrated by them or those that they are in cahoots with, you know, for people to believe that, you know, masonry and, you know, Christianity isn't, you know, one and one. You know, I beg to differ. You know, I beg to differ because, you know, I seen firsthand. You know, I seen firsthand accounts that, you know, they was actually involved with each other. I seen it. You know. You know. And then we do have King James, you know, who himself Freemason. You know, was a Freemason. You know, and man. But yeah, let's try to be more straightforward in our um our presentation. If we are gang stalkers, why don't we just come out and you know, say we gang stalkers? We're not really the gang. We're not really those that are gang stalked. You know, we are the ones that's doing the stalking. We're not the targeted. We're the ones doing the targeting. You know, but we do know that, you know, there's sources behind sources behind sources behind sources. You know. But I just wanted to share that because it needed to be shared. So, peace.